Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. Hi, this is Bill. I thought this interview was so good, I wanted you to hear it again. So enjoy. And a warm welcome to the afternoon show. I'm Bill Arnold, and thank you for joining me today. If you were with me in the first hour, we got on the topic of emotions and trauma, and we're going to continue that today with Dr. Gregory Jantz. He's written a book called Triumph Over Trauma, Find Healing and Wholeness from Past Pain. So glad to have Greg back on the show. Greg, welcome.
Always good to talk to you, and trauma is the word. A lot of people are using the word trauma and feeling like they've experienced a lot of trauma.
And as we look at what's gone on in the world lately, I mean, not to mention what happened with COVID-19, and all of a sudden people had job loss and financial trouble and all kinds of relapses into substance abuse and new bad habits, and that produced a lot of emotions, anxiety, and trauma, didn't it?
You know, what's happened is there was a lot of fear, and we're in a culture of fear. That we could say that's true right now, but you mentioned COVID. Well, the last three and a half years, it's been one fear after another, layers and layers of fear equal trauma, and then there's this, people don't know, what do I trust? Mm-hmm. What in the world is true or not true? Do I believe things that are being said? Where do I get truth? And so you mix fear with a lot of uncertainty and distrust. It's a perfect environment or a perfect storm for people to feel repeated trauma in their life. If you've struggled with anxiety, you've struggled with depression, or maybe you have post-traumatic stress disorder, this repeated fear really does increase that trauma.
Mm-hmm. Greg, can we kind of set the table for what trauma is for those who don't know exactly if they've had a really bad experience or if it's considered something traumatic? I had a listener from the last hour say, how about if you don't think you went through trauma, but you described your situation to a friend and they tell you that you did go through trauma?
Yes. Well, let's look at this, because what could be stressful for one person, another person tends to handle differently. The same could be said about trauma. And if you have had, let's say, abuse, maybe it's physical abuse, maybe there's been sexual abuse, emotional abuse, but it's been traumatic, and that happened earlier in your life. And I would say that would be trauma. And now, as we grow and time passes, that event or those events of trauma, the memories are still there. The effects of that trauma, maybe it's affected your ability to have good, trusting relationships. Maybe you've always struggled with being close or feeling intimate or close with another person because of those past traumatic events in your life. So trauma could be something significant, like I said, abuse. Trauma could be betrayal. Maybe in a marriage there was betrayal. Trauma could be significant grief and loss, maybe an unexpected loss. A person who you lost a loved one, maybe in an automobile accident. That certainly would qualify. So trauma comes in different forms. Sometimes we think of post-traumatic stress disorder, and that certainly is trauma, and we think sometimes as it relates to war or vets, and that certainly is true. Trauma comes, though, in other forms.
Greg, if a person, say, grew up in a alcoholic environment and what they learned was don't talk, don't trust, don't feel, would you consider that trauma?
If I'm not allowed to have my own feelings or my own opinions or my own experience, and if you're told that you're devalued, you go, no, 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 that's not right. How could you ever feel that way? Well, over time, it teaches you that, well, I can't trust myself, and I'm worthless.
Yeah, my opinion doesn't matter.
My opinion doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Nobody's going to really love me. You feel shame. You feel defective. And so I think the end result is that's layers of trauma, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. So Dr. Gregory Jantz is my guest. His book is called Triumph Over Trauma, Find Healing and Wholeness from Past Pain. And I know that there are so many people that find themselves in this situation. And I know, Greg, you can talk about 3 healing keys for trauma. I'd love for you to do that.
Oh, sure. Well, when we look at trauma, sometimes we get hung up, and you really brought this out nicely, because what may not be trauma for one person is traumatic for the next. Let's just respect the experience. Whatever effects that had on you, that is real. And so I think one of the first steps that we need to look at is really telling the truth about it, telling the truth about the effects that this had in my life, telling the truth about, well, yeah, this did have an effect on me. And so often we want to minimize it or downplay it. And so what I really say we have to do very first is we've got to say what was true. That's why I even start off and go, the truth is going to set you free. Well, you may not feel that at first. It may be overwhelming. In fact, I had a gal, and she said, you know what, if I really, really talked about the things that happened to me, I would lose it. I would lose my mind. I would never get it back. It's too overwhelming.
Mm.
And so there can be that kind of that lie, I will lose it. And she said, well, I will start crying and I will lose it and I'll never come back.
Well, so, okay, when you get that message from somebody, what's the response?
Well, I think that's where we share it. And I think we've got to know that if I really share these things, that somebody's, like, and I'm going to say a good Christian counselor who knows what they're doing, is going to be with me. They're going to help walk me through this, and I have to start somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
But I need to remember I'm not alone. I'm not alone. And I can begin. Sometimes we need to, if there's been a lot of, let's say, abuse, maybe I need help building a timeline in my life and with different ages and just putting together, start with the different things that happened at different ages and where did I live. And it may take, I've had people where, it takes several months just to build out a timeline. And just that can kind of be an overwhelming assignment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to dwell on the past. Let me just say that I believe wholeheartedly in God's redemptive power to come in and really give us healing from maybe a long list of things. But you're not alone. And I really don't believe we dwell on the past. We just want to deal with the truth of the past. And sometimes God will bring a certain memory to mind, and it helps you. At some point, I have to enter into, how am I going to forgive the past? How am I going to forgive a person? And we have to begin to talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not, I'm not saying, okay, well, your next appointment, we're just going to work on forgiving all these abusers, and I know you were sexually abused, but we're just going to work on forgiving it. That's not the approach. We really want to carefully and prayerfully deal with those things, but we also need to be able to get to a place where I can talk about and I can have the memory, but it does not overwhelm me. I can have that memory and I can share with somebody what happened to me, but I'm okay, though it still may be painful.
Mm-hmm.
I'm okay through the process.
Greg, I'm thinking of the word trigger right now because...
Oh, yeah.
If I get triggered, how am I going to be able to put a cap on the feelings of overwhelm or trauma?
Yes, that's right. And the trigger. And, right now, what's going on in our world, we could just take Israel, we could take everything going on, and for many, those three letters, war.
Yes.
Okay. They've had a family member killed in a war. They've been in a war. This is a time of really great triggers. And it just feels like when you get a trigger hits you, it's like, oh man, it just engulfed me, and it feels overwhelming at times.
Mm-hmm.
And I just want to acknowledge that, because that could be the case for some listening to us.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Gregory Jantz is my guest. If you just joined us, his book is called Triumph Over Trauma, Find Healing and Wholeness from Past Pain. Greg, in your book, you talk about 10 truths about trauma. And would you be kind enough to share a couple of those 10 truths with us?
Oh, yeah, 10 truths of trauma. Oh, my goodness. And I appreciate you are so wonderful, because you really go through the resources, and I appreciate that. Well, one of the truths, or one of the keys that we have to walk through is, I'm going to start here, it's the physical. And when I say the physical, carrying trauma in our body, carrying that chronic stress has a physiological effect. And a lot of times people will notice digestion, it just always seems off. I can't get good sleep. And so, we even do, with our clients, we do sleep studies. So we want to look at, how can I help you? Because if you've been heavy burdened emotionally, if I can help you physically start to get some physical strength back, to start to sleep better, if I can begin to help you there, and maybe even some better nutrition, maybe a little exercise, but if I can start to help you feel physically stronger, it's going to help you walk through some of the next steps.
Yeah.
But building that physical strength. And I don't mean to oversimplify that, but we do need to care for our physical bodies as we begin to deal with trauma.
Yeah. All right, Greg, how about another truth from that?
Well, another truth is
there's some
spiritual truth. There's some spiritual truths, and one of those is trauma can be bigger than we are. And when I say bigger than we are, even to deal with it and to forgive what has happened to you, or to forgive a certain person. It doesn't mean you have to be in relationship with that person. Maybe that person's not even alive. I remember somebody that had been very harmful to me and abusive. I remember that I actually had to go to a gravesite, and I stood there and read my forgiveness letter at a gravesite. I know what that's like. I know how overwhelming that can feel. And so, but coming to a place that, you know what, God has to help me do this. This is bigger than me. And it really is. It's bigger than what we can do. And I think that's why when people walk through trauma and they start to realize that they really can have healing and recovery, you go, wow, this had to be God, because I couldn't do this on my own. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to address some spiritual truths. And I think, too, partially is we need to look at, am I stuck in blame through trauma? Have I developed a critical spirit towards people? Have I developed a critical spirit that says that, everybody else is at fault, and I'm blaming others? That's really important to look at that.
Yeah.
Because that can be a block to some healings.
I would imagine it would be. We're going to take a little break. Dr. Gregory Jantz is my guest. His book is called Triumph Over Trauma, Find Healing and Wholeness from Past pain. If you have a question or comment for Dr. Jantz, let me know. 877-933-2484. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world, and right now there are kids in desperate need of Jesus, food and medical care. This is your time to become their champion, to change their life. When you sponsor just one child, you plant seeds of hope in their heart, and you work together with people on the ground to change the families, communities, and the future of these kids. You might not be able to change the world, but for one child, you can change theirs. Meet the kids. Find your child at myfaithradio.com. I'm back with Dr. Gregory Jantz. His book is called Triumph Over Trauma. Find healing and wholeness from past pain. Maybe that's your story. You've had trauma in the past and it still is around. So we're going to continue to talk about that. He's got a book where he lays out 10 truths about trauma. And in chapter 8, Greg, you talk about crushed in spirit, how trauma damages the soul. And a listener said, here's about emotions. I'm grieving the permanent loss of a lifelong want, plus the belief that God either decided not to prevent it or actually set it up. How to trust him after that?
Wow.
I see a crushed spirit. I'm sure you do too.
Yes. And a crushed spirit causes us then to distrust. It causes us to put a kind of a cap on us to ever hope again. And it may cause a great deal of depression and anxiety because we feel like we don't have a good future, or we feel like the future that we wanted is not there. There is so much of a generation right now that feels like they don't have hope for the future. Psychologists have come up with, psychologists, they've come up with a new term called foreshortened future. That's a funny word, but foreshortened future. And it just simply describes what this crushed spirit I'm hearing, that I feel like there's not much hope for my future, and it doesn't really matter that much. My future is shortened, and with that is the depression. With that is I look towards the future, and it doesn't feel very optimistic. It doesn't feel hopeful, and so I just want to acknowledge that, and that's how it can feel. Here's what I have to put some guardrails up now: a guardrail of developing resentment, a guardrail of letting anger kind of guide my life, probably a guardrail of isolation. It's easy then for me to isolate. I feel like I've lost a dream, and I am afraid to dream again. So what does God have in store for me? Maybe part of what I need to be doing is allowing God to reset his plan for me. And I don't mean that to sound easy, but there's a resetting sometimes of a direction. When we have one dream that seems like it's gone. It is gone. And you go, well, that's it. But what God has this way of taking our past and shaping it into where he wants us to be. And I'm just going to say, let's be really open to that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do everything we know to nurture our well-being, nurture our faith and our spiritual well-being. Let's really look at how to keep healthy relationships, guard against that isolation in our life, guard against falling into the trap of anger, and sometimes we fall into despair because we feel like we don't have that future. But I'm going to say, just because I've seen it before, now this is my 39th year in the helping professions, and I oversee a facility where people come from all over the country, and they're here for 4, 5, 6 weeks. And I see the transformation. So that's why I can be a little bit bold and say, no, I see directions of lives change. I see there's hope. And so my word is, hope comes when there's a plan. Let's see what the new plan, let's see what God's plan is now.
Greg, I like that a lot. And the idea that I'm going to pray for God to reset my life, if that was what I need to have done, is a bold, scary prayer. But maybe that's exactly what we need to do.
Yes. It is.
When you talk about the 10 truths of trauma in your book, do you have one truth that you consider to be kind of rises to the top, the most important of all the 10?
Well, hey, this the whole person, so it all works together. I think one truth is, for me, it's going to go back to forgiveness. I think it's a key in our healing, and not just from trauma, but I see what happens when there's unforgiveness. I see how bitterness can enter into every relationship we have. I see that without forgiveness, we can grow deeper into our depression. It's hard to see that we have a future or meaning for our life. I also see that with unforgiveness, we're going to probably lose some relationships over time. That said, I know we hear so much about forgiveness. I know we're told, hey, this forgiveness is, important, just do it. And I just want to say, I know it doesn't work that way. I know there's a supernatural intervention in a person's life that enables us at times to, maybe it's a slow process of letting go and letting go of pain and letting that be diffused in God's love. So don't mean for it to sound easy, but there's great blessings when we start to live in that mode of forgiveness. There is freedom, and again, you're going to see more and more of the positive of forgiveness as time goes along. I don't mean that it happens right away, but you're going to see good benefit as you continue to practice that forgiveness.
Dr. Greg Jantz is my guest. And Greg, when you have trauma, it not only lives in your mind, but in your body, right?
Oh, I'm so glad you mentioned that. What we know, and truly what research has shown us, is that trauma, we can store it. We store the pain in our body, in our muscles. So absolutely.
Yeah, I'd just love to hear more about that, because it seems that when we walk around with that in our cells, our bones, our muscles, that we've got an issue.
Yes, we do have an issue. So there's been quite a bit of work that shows what trauma and chronic stress can do to our immune system, and how it can suppress us, how it can affect our wellness. So as you look at this, and you begin to go, okay, I've got to care for my body. People will, certain areas of their body, we usually see digestion, we see a lot of low back pain, we see a lot of headaches. It's like it's got to come out some way, and the body begins to cry out, I've had enough. Panic attacks are very interesting. Panic attacks is, the body just takes over, and you can't reverse it, and you're in full-blown panic, and you think you're having a heart attack, for example. Well, panic can be a way of the body saying, I've had enough, and your body kind of lets it off through panic and through anxiety.
Greg, if grandma was anxious and mom was anxious, is there any surprise that child is anxious?
Well, we learn it. We can learn fear.
Okay.
Now, if you grow up in an environment of fear, you just kind of learned how to be that way. We need to remember, too, kids are like a sponge. They just absorb all of everything that's going on. And so if your environment is a culture, a home of fear, and there's a home of anxiousness, then they're going to feel that.
Yeah.
They're going to absorb that. Now, we also can learn, unlearn fear. And I see folks who, man, I grew up in a culture, a home of fear, and now they're some of the most courageous folks you'll ever see.
Yeah.
So you can reverse it.
Mm-hmm.
But remember, fear is a tool of the enemy, so to speak.
Yeah.
Fear also paralyzes us. It keeps us from times making good decisions. Fear tends to disable that executive function, the prefrontal cortex. So you take your forehead, and that part of the brain there is where we make what we call our executive or our good or wise decisions. Well, fear tends to bypass that part of the brain when you have too much fear. And it's hard to make good decisions with too much fear.
Mm-hmm. Greg, I had a question come in to Dr. Jantz. I was born into and grew up in an alcoholic home. There was trauma, and as an adult in my 50s, I want to heal. I've never done counseling, and we don't have counseling here in my small community. I'm wondering if it's helpful to do adult children of alcoholics or Al-Anon 12 steps, or what should be some steps. Also, can you have generational trauma in our cells that may have come from a previous relative, for example? Just curious. I just ordered your book, by the way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I don't know your name, but thank you for reaching out and sharing this comment. Yes, I think it's never too late, by the way, to receive good, I'm going to say good, godly, skilled Christian counseling. And sometimes, if I only had the virtual option, that's what I would be doing.
Okay.
I love meeting in person, and that's not always possible. We work with folks in some remote areas, and I understand that's not always possible. But begin to reach out. The American Association of Christian Counselors has a pretty good size directory to be able to plug into. But I would encourage you, and I always say, hey, in fairness, give the counselor, 3 sessions. Sometimes the person goes, I've never had counseling before, and the first session didn't help me. Hey, hang on. Got to give it a little bit longer before you make a decision to bail.
Mm-hmm.
It's really true. Give it all a fair chance.
Yeah. We're going to take a break. Dr. Gregory Jantz is our guest. Triumph Over Trauma is the name of his book. And if you've got a question or comment and you would like to talk to Dr. Jantz about it, let me know. Text it over, please, 877-933-2484. And I will do my very best to get your question on the air to Dr. Jantz. We'll be right back.
It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold. Prime time, drive time. Let's get it started. Jump in your car. Yeah. What's for dinner? It's the afternoon show with Bill Arnold.
Welcome back to the show. I'm so glad to have Dr. Gregory Jantz as my guest, and he's now in stereophonic. Greg, welcome back.
Ah, yes.
Yes, we've improved the quality of your sound, so thank you for switching over to our new connection. You sound wonderful. All right.
Wonderful.
Yeah, I've got a couple of questions. Can I run them by you? We've got
Let's do it.
Lots of listeners that are very interested dealing with some of their trauma. This comment, I was sexually abused as a child, and it caused me to live a homosexual lifestyle for a long time. And my stepfather didn't treat me well. Lots of verbal and emotional abuse. I've since gotten married and have had children. My wife and I are separated because I couldn't open my heart to her fully, because she would make me feel like my stepdad did when she would treat me like I was nothing. I can't get past the feelings of being a homosexual and the feelings my wife made me feel. How do I get past these feelings? I've totally forgiven my molesters and stepdad.
wonderful to hear that you can say, I've totally forgiven.
Yeah.
To come to that place is such a significant place, and just to hear you say that. So thank you for this wonderful message and report. Here's what I know can happen. We still can take on some of the identity that I'm defective, that I'm not good enough, and we can still feel damaged, if you will. And so the question, part of what I heard was the struggle of shame, the struggle of I'm still not really okay, and something is not okay within me. And I hear that, but I believe that is the shame. That is the old messages that really kind of wants to bring you back down.
Mm-hmm.
Shame lies to us. Shame says you'll never amount to anything, or you always will have this struggle, and this is kind of who you are, and just get used to it. That's the lie of shame.
That's horrible.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
And I just want to say it's the lie of shame. And so let's keep that in mind, and we've got to have at least two people in our life that know us. They're telling us the truth about who we are. They're speaking truth into our life, and we trust them. And we also have got to be working on renewing our mind. I think sometimes this is as simple as I'm going to have a scripture that I'm going to write on a 3x5 card. I'm going to practice saying that out loud a couple times in a day. Just keep it really simple, but I'm going to start speaking God's word out loud. I'm going to have people in my life that are telling me the truth. And sometimes I may possibly identify something that still needs some attention. God may bring it to mind where I still need some healing. So let's be open to that.
Mm-hmm. Greg, another question that came in, my 30-year-old son was just hospitalized for the second time with mental illness. He's had some traumas which seem to define him, and he's made poor choices. If he doesn't go to therapy because he doesn't think he has emotional problems. So what can my husband and I and others and the other 3 children do to help him?
And I sense just this great deal of love and concern. There's great empathy for what he must be going through. One of the things that, and this was a young man, right?
30 years old, yes. Hospitalized for the second time with mental illness.
Yeah. Understand, okay, he's an adult, and we're going to probably want to make sure he has the right kind of help. But we're probably not, besides loving him and being there, but we're probably not the right ones to give him that help at this point. But we need to make sure that he is receiving the kind of help that he needs. And I'm going to say, that's a counselor, or it's a program like what we do where there's intensive type help. The greatest thing that we can do with adult children, and I can speak from some experience here, that we want to, they need to know that we're there for them, but we can't be codependent. We can't rescue them. We've got to speak into their lives, but have somebody else or others that are really, even at 30, that are mentoring them in truth.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I would agree. So, Greg, what about when you talk about this 30-year-old son who is in hospital for the second episode and has some mental illness? What are some practical ways? How can we rewire our brain when we come out of a traumatic situation or we've gone through trauma? How do we get our brain rewired?
Well, that's a really important question. Because rewiring our brain is usually not done with medication. Medication can be a helpful bridge, but it's not a rewiring of our brain. So what does my brain need? And that's everything from nutrition to, even such things as hyperbaric oxygen treatment is being done to help the brain where there's been mental illness. There's IV nutrient therapy that oftentimes amino acids and other brain nutrients are being given. So there's things that you can do. I'm going to say a little more on the natural side that really can be quite healing to the brain where there's been trauma. I've seen this because I've looked at brain scans of individuals that have had a great deal of either addiction or significant abuse in their life. And you can see, don't have to be a brain expert. You can see visually where there is kind of hot spots in the brain, and you can see over time how that changes. So God made us more resilient than we can ever imagine.
Mm-hmm. Greg, one of the chapters in your book, Triumph Over Trauma, Find Healing and Wholeness from Past Pain by Dr. Gregory Jantz. One chapter that jumped off the page for me was chapter 15 about revising your script, because I've always agreed you don't ever write anything. You only rewrite stuff. When people have a creative block, I say, just write something down, and then you'll end up rewriting it, and then you'll be glad you did. But you've got to get words on paper. You just can't sit and wait for this perfect inspiration because it may never come. So just get words on paper and then rewrite what you've written, and you'll probably rewrite that. So would you talk about revising your script?
Yes, sometimes we're living by a troubled script. That's that shape. Sometimes we're living by a lie, and we're living out maybe what you feel like a family member wanted you to live out, and you're really not living what God could write for you and does write for all of us. And so I'm just going to say there's times where it is writing, it is taking a journal, it is learning how to write about your life, and moving from a victim to more of a place of victory. And there is something happens when we start. Just do it for 30 days. Start a journal, and it may be in that journal. And I'm looking right here. I have one on my desk. Write out. Maybe it's just the predominant emotions of the day, and spend no more than 15 minutes max on your daily journal, and begin to build an awareness by writing. And then let's start rewriting some things that you want for your life. Maybe we're going to start off with rewriting some life goals that could be a part of your script. But ask God to direct you. Pray for wisdom. Lord God, how and what do you want me to do and to be, and how can I be at peace with myself? There's some discoveries that can be made in the old-fashioned way of taking a pen. I'm holding a pen, taking a pen with a notepad, and you start writing. Mm-hmm. That doesn't happen the same way when you're on a keyboard.
Right. Exactly. So in revising your script, and I do really like this chapter. It says, update your life narrative based on fact, not fiction. And you say at the end, allow yourself to hope again. Examine your life, even if you are in a deep place of sadness, and seek to find hope. That's really encouraging, Greg.
Yes.
So
yes, there is hope. And sometimes we discover things by writing, and things come to our mind that you go, oh, well, that was a surprise. It just started by you sitting down and writing a few things.
Yes.
And you go, well, I'm not a writer. I've never kept a journal. Oh, that's okay. I've just said, try it for 30 days, see what happens.
Mm-hmm. All right. Let's move on. You talk about dismantling our defenses. Would you talk about what that is and maybe provide an example of how to do it?
Dismantling our defenses. Okay. A defense is a wall, something we've put up to protect ourselves. If you've ever had somebody in your life and they just are instantly defensive about everything, it's like, it's hard to give them feedback. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm going to suggest is, look at yourself, can people give you feedback? Can you receive feedback? Can you, sometimes we don't like the word criticism and we take it too deeply, but can somebody look at you in the eye and just share honestly with you? Or are you going to, do I deflect it? Do I defend my position? Do I deny? Just think of what's my style or my strategy.
That's good.
Or do I say, thank you for sharing that. I'm going to give that some thought. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Right. That's a whole different approach.
Yeah, indeed it is. Dr. Gregory Jantz is my guest. His book is Triumph Over Trauma. Find healing and wholeness from past pain. We'll be right back with Greg in just a minute. Hi, this is Bill Arnold, host of the afternoon show. If you're a reader and you love Susie Larson, I've got quite an offer for you. She has written a new book called Waking Up to the Goodness of God, 40 Days Towards Healing and Wholeness. And you're not going to believe this, but our friends at Thomas Nelson, the publisher, has said we will give you 100 copies of Susie Larson's brand new book to give away. And all you have to do to enter to win yours is to go to myfaithradio.com. Connecting faith to life, Faith Radio. If you just joined me, we're talking to Dr. Gregory Jantz. He's written a book called Triumph Over Trauma, Find Healing and Wholeness from Past Pain. Greg, maybe you would talk about post-traumatic growth. What is post-traumatic growth? And maybe, again, can you provide an example for us?
Yeah, post-traumatic growth. We've heard of post-traumatic stress. Yikes, post-traumatic stress. That is something that is the after effects of all the trauma. It's the flashbacks, it's the depression, it's the anxiety. Post-traumatic growth says I've walked and I have healing in my life, and I'm going to put myself on a pattern, a trajectory of growth. And this is so important, a trajectory of growth. And one of the things that we want to look at is how do I keep the people that are going to help me growing? What's my spiritual plan of growth? My physical plan of growth? So you've got to have a growth plan for the whole person for this to really work.
Mm-hmm. Greg, as I look through your book, I see the word hope a lot, and I love that that's a common theme throughout your book. So, and I know people have just gotten in their car, they've had a long day, and they're curious about why hope is so common throughout your book. Why is hope essential for healing from trauma?
Because without hope, you'll feel like there's no plan. Without hope, you will begin to slide into ultimately some despondency and despair. So what we're looking for is hope comes. Hope comes when there's a plan. And let's be a part of creating that plan.
Mm-hmm. All right, I get messages that come to the show, and some are really hard to read, some are hard to understand because they need to be put in a context. And this happened probably in the 1960s, and this listener was beaten by teachers. You know, there was a different mentality back in schools. There was physical confrontation back then, and there was some abuse as a result of struggling with learning. And he said it affected me, and I wasn't able to finish college, and kind of led to a string of not so good jobs. And I mean, there's no plan there, Greg. What's the plan for a post-traumatic growth?
Yes, and the plan is I have to be working with somebody. I have got to be held accountable. I get it. But when I say accountable, it just means accountable to my growth. I've got to see, what does God's word say about who I am? And this is so important.
Mm-hmm. When we look at steps that we can take, healing steps, and we want to do something that's positive as early as tonight,
yes.
Do you have an encouragement for many who are listening today that say, I feel like I don't have a plan. I need to have a plan. I've been living with this trauma for so long, and it's affected my relationships. It's affected my employment, and I want to make a change. What little step can I make for the positive?
Yes, here you go. I want you first to take my confidential online test or questionnaire that is all about trauma. And
how
what
would they
that's
do that?
about, okay, aplaceofhope.com,
Okay.
aplaceofhope.com, and you'll see it says, I think, online test in the upper right. And it's actually is totally confidential, and it will send you back some feedback and some information. But just see, okay, trauma. Let's gather some information, and let's see, where do you score? What's what are all the symptoms and things that you could be experiencing?
And is that free of charge to do that? Is there a fee for that?
Oh yeah, no, it's free. It's confidential. It's just take the first baby step to getting more information that will help you. And in fact, I will. You'll see. You're going to be sent a few things that are just free gift as a place just to get you started, just to get you in the mode of making some decisions.
Mm-hmm. Greg, what if I'm not a journal person? I don't like to sit down and try to write, and the minute I do, it doesn't work. What do I do? Is there a plan B? I know it's really important to process things through a pen.
Yeah.
Thoughts? Oop, I think we lost him. That's not good. I can say what I think, but I think he's absolutely right. I think when it comes to getting your thoughts on paper, it's really critical that you are able to articulate some of these thoughts and to write them down, and then you've got them out of your head and onto a page. And I have sporadically journaled in my life, and it's gone okay some of the time and not so good another part of the time. So I'm also encouraging you to see if there's someone you can identify in your life, and this is in his book, that you could develop into a closer friend. And I know in this time of trauma, when you have a friend that comes alongside you and encourages you, and you want to look for a person who you feel is safe and accepting and could become a close friend and confidant. Maybe this is somebody that you know from church or a coworker or a neighbor. And Greg would say this takes courage for sure. But he also said this is how close friendships are born. And I think we all look back on our life and that we look at the things that we value so much, and we value the people in our life that journeyed with us, that went along, walked through life's difficulties with us. And if we had traumas, they were there for us. They showed up, they suited up and showed up, and that made all the difference. And so maybe there's somebody that you need to reconnect with in terms of a friendship, or maybe there's someone that you know that you would want to invite into starting a friendship with. But anyway, I think that's another important part of personal healing. And I would encourage that. I say there's no downside to having another good friend in your life. So I don't think we're going to get Greg back, but as a wonderful couple. You're back. Here. Oh, I don't know where you went.
I don't know.
We sure missed you.
I've just been sitting here for you.
Okay, we sure missed you. So we just have a minute left, Greg. So maybe you would give everyone maybe one thing to walk away with from your book, Triumph Over Trauma.
Oh, I'm going to use the word again, and you've said it so well. There's hope.
Okay.
Hope. Just remember, hope comes when there's a plan. Start today to build that plan, and either for you or for a loved one. And the plan may look like doing the free online questionnaire, getting some of the free information, but start somewhere today, and you won't regret it. We tend to regret it if we don't do anything.
Yeah. And Greg, tell me the name of the address again, the web address.
Yeah, a place of hope.
aplaceofhope.com.
And just look for the tab. I think it says test on it, upper right. And it's, again, only you will see your information.
Okay.
So it's totally confidential.
Okay. Thank you so much, Greg, for being on the show. It's been a delight.
You got it. My pleasure.
Thank you. Dr. Gregory Jantz has been my guest. Triumph over trauma, find healing and wholeness from past pain. That's our show for the day. I look forward to being with you tomorrow. Have a great night. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.